is a Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is our 195th episode of this show, recorded on June 13th, 2018. And if you want to see all of my episodes, you can go to my website at walkinthepark.tv, walkinthepark.tv, and see any of them. This week, we are going to go to Watkins Glen State Park. And let me see, actually, there's the website there, walkinthepark.tv. Oh, first, before we go to Watkins Glen State Park, I'll just say what this is. This is a public access television show on Ithaca, New York, Channel 13. You can see our whole schedule online at pegasus.webstarts.com. Anybody can become a producer. Anybody that lives within the Ithaca, town of Ithaca, city of Ithaca area. And you can come down and take a course to use our studios or to another course to take out our equipment. We have a Facebook page at Pegasus TV, like our Facebook page. You can go there and see some of the shows that are listed, but you can also see all the schedules of our series on, and some of them actually watch online on our website at pegasus.webstarts.com. So now we're going to go over to Watkins Glen and take a look at some interesting rock pools and also probably its most famous waterfall. So let's go up in the sky here for a minute. Take a look. We're on the right of center is Ithaca, New York, south end of Cayuga Lake, and west of there in the lower left corner is Watkins Glen State Park, and next to the town, the village of Watkins Glen at the south end of Seneca Lake. So we'll zoom in a little bit more. There you can see the village in the right center, the south end of the lake, and then the state park is labeled there, that wooded area, and we'll go down even closer in Google Earth here, and all that wooded area, you can see that crease coming up from the lower left. That is the gorge, the glen called Watkins Glen, which has been celebrated and visited by the public since 1863, became a state park in 1906. So we're going to take a look, first of all, at we're going to go through some sections of the gorge, and let's take a look at this one. This is Central Cascade, which is the tallest waterfall in the park. There's 19 waterfalls in the gorge. This one is just the top part of it here. We're really looking at the bridge above it called Folly Bridge, because that is the beginning just above this Central Cascade being halfway up the glen. The person on the bridge is actually taking a photograph looking upstream towards what's called the Glen of Pools. So this is kind of the view that he had. And on the far distance there are some pools, and you go across the bridge and up on the trail a little bit, and you can see this dropping from one pool to the other. So it's called the Glen of Pools, and it's a pretty cool place. So I have a little video I'm going to show you. It's actually part of it's going to go into a larger video I'm doing. So this is a segment of a video that I'm working on about Watkins Glen State Park. And let's just go to that now. It's short, just a couple minutes. And the Glen of Pools, check it out. The remarkable beauty sculpted by water in the rock of Watkins Glen continues to unfold in the Glen of Pools. Directly in front of you is a shallow pothole that is the staging area for the water's leap over Central Cascade. If there once was a waterfall pouring into this pothole, it is gone now. But the smooth, curved sides of this pool give a good sense of just how finely rocks and sand polish the sides of a pothole, whether below a waterfall or just in the course of the stream. Beyond, you can see more potholes in the Glen of Pools. Each pool empties into another. The falls on the upstream edge of each pool are so short they hardly deserve to be called waterfalls. But the pools are magnificent with their charming round contours and green depths as they tumble from one into the next. Near each little waterfall is a joint crossing the stream bed that may be where the waterfall and pool began to form. The Glen of Pools winds around the bend and under one of the most beautiful waterfalls in Watkins Glen, Rainbow Falls. Okay, so that was short. Yeah. Let's take a look at that again here. This is the Central Cascade pouring underneath a stone bridge that was built. Here's another view of it here, maybe a little bit better, the bridge. The stone bridge, and above that is the Glen of Pools. Well, that bridge was originally called Folly Bridge because it's in a location that periodically gets washed out by floods because the gorge is narrow from there up, the Glen of Pools and Rainbow Falls, and when it gets a really high water and floods coming down the gorge, it piles up against that bridge, and I have seen it rip the walls off that bridge myself, probably at least a couple times, and over the years. And back in the old days, it was made of wood. And here's the view, almost from the same spot, but looking with the bridge in the foreground at the bottom. And that was a wooden bridge, and it was continually being washed out, as were other wooden structures back in the 1800s, from 1863 to 1900, and actually early 1900s, for about 40 years or so. Those were the kind of structures that were there. There were wooden structures. Here's another. These are actually colorized postcards, I think, of black and white photographs. But look at that Folly Bridge down there, and the Glen of Pools. So very old stuff, didn't last long. So now we're gonna take a look at Rainbow Falls, which is probably the most photographed place in the Glen, and actually that's what my next video coming up will tell you. Here is a peek around the corner, just coming up out of the Glen of Pools, looking at Rainbow Falls coming down the cliff there. That's a really nice little shot there. So, like I said, this is all part of a project a video project that I've been working on, which will be a companion to this book that I published 10 years ago about the park, which is available at the park. And that's pretty much going to be a narration of what you see there. So let's take a look at this little section of Rainbow Falls. Next video coming right up. On the approach to Rainbow Falls, you see a ribbon of water streaming down out of the forest on a green slide of rock. It then leaps over the trail and into Glen Creek, which has just jumped down Triple Cascade. The scene is so lovely and unusual that this view of Rainbow Falls and Triple Cascade may be the most photographed spot in Watkins Glen. This is the second waterfall that you must walk behind if you are to continue ahead on the Gorge Trail. You are walking along a natural recess in the cliff caused by the more rapid weathering and erosion of a layer of shale. The waterfall is the end of a small tributary stream that passes through the campground on the rim above. Most people never see the rainbow. It's best seen in the summer in late afternoon. The sun has to be shining and the water must be flowing readily. You need to stand on the trail on the upstream side of the falls while sunlight strikes the falls from over your shoulder. A spectrum arches through the waterfall. Mark Twain, who lived nearby in Elmira in the late 1860s, tried to convey the remarkable beauty of Rainbow Falls. If one desires to be so stirred by a poem of nature, wrought in the happily commingled graces of picturesque rocks, glimpsed distances, foliage, color, shifting lights and shadows, and falling water, that the tears almost come into his eyes, so potent is the charm exerted, he need not go away from America to enjoy such an experience. The Rainbow Fall in Watkins Glen on the Erie Railway is an example. It would recede into pitiable insignificance if the callous tourist drew an arithmetic on it. but left to compete for the honors simply on scenic grace and beauty, the grand, the august, and the sublime being barred the contest, it could challenge the old world and the new to produce its peer. So few people see the rainbow. And like I said, there was a ranger that worked there for many, many years who would go off at about, I don't know, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he never had seen the rainbow because the rainbow didn't start until about 4:30 or 5 or so in the afternoon when the gorge runs from west to east. So in the summertime, the sun sets right down through the gorge and can hit the spray from the west on Rainbow Falls, which is on the south side of the gorge. So it's you just stand just upstream from there and you can see it. So while I was working at the state parks, we had something called rainbow walks where we'd start out, I guess, about 4:30, and we'd walk up the gorge, and then if it was a sunny day, you got to see the rainbows. So that was pretty nice. And I think they did that for years afterwards after I stopped working there some years ago. Now, some of the pictures that we saw in the, well, at least one of them, the picture we saw in that short video was out of this, that drawing at the end there was out of this little book here, which was written originally by a man named Morval Van Els, who was a journalist who came to town and got the job of promoting what became Watkins Glen, beginning in 1863. This one, I think, says it's by A.J. Michener, but actually the words in it are by Morval Van Els. And this was, I think, 1879 or something like that was published. But in that, there are sections, various sections of the Glen back then. Really nice guidebook at the time. And this was the image that I showed you in the end of that short video. So, but the other images were, there was a painting I showed you at the beginning of that short video, which was this painting here. And this one, I believe, I took a picture of at the Schuyler County Historical Museum in Montour Falls, and it was painted by this gentleman named Captain James Hope. And Captain James Hope was he was an artist, originally from Vermont, then he was in New York City, and I think he went back to Vermont, I'm not sure. And anyway, it was history back and forth between Vermont and New York City, and he had a studio in New York, and he was part of the Hudson River School of Painters, and he fell in love with Watkins Glen. But before he did that, he got some acclaim for his artwork during the Civil War. He was a captain, obviously, in the Civil War from a regiment in Vermont, and I believe he had an injury so that or a wound or whatever, so that he couldn't actually get involved in any more combat, but he was engaged to be a map maker, and he did also drawings and paintings of the battle scenes, including the most famous ones, which were from the Battle of Antietam in Maryland, which was considered to be one of the 2 bloodiest battles of the Civil War. And he didn't hide that fact in some of his paintings. This isn't the worst, but there's another one that shows a whole road full of corpses. But anyway, it's very famous for that, and those are the Antietam National Battlefield has some of these paintings, I think, hanging there. So, but then he I think he was probably back in the studio in New York, and he got a commission from a guy who had gone to Watkins Glen. Now, Watkins Glen, like I said, opened up to the public in 1863. Before that, it was mainly just for mill work, and they harnessed the power from mills. And then it became recognized as a potential scenic tourist attraction. And this fellow went to Watkins Glen. He loved it, and he persuaded Captain Hope to go to Watkins Glen and paint Rainbow Falls. So this is just a small painting, but the one he painted for the fellow was much larger. Pretty big painting for $10,000. Now think about what $10,000 was back in 1872 when he went to Watkins Glen to do this. So he fell in love with the place. He was just going to do a that one painting. I guess he wasn't intending to stay, but he fell in love with it. He brought his family, his wife and his son there, and he stayed there until he died. in 1892. But in the meantime, he built this little studio and gallery where he did his paintings, and people came and they bought his paintings in the galleries, and he added some more. Well, here's a picture. This is a crop in from a stereo view, obviously. This is a early on when this gallery was there, and then you look here, you can see a gazebo to the left, and then we'll go up past that gazebo, turn around, and look, and you can see the gazebo from the west side, and then it says art gallery in that sign on the left there. Probably you may be able to read that. It's kind of dark. And then here's a painting he did of his gallery from the other direction. Now this is looking from the next picture is looking from his gallery towards the suspension bridge that goes across the Gorge, the footbridge, and then what's called the Swiss Chalet. So he did this, I think, in 1873. So that's a really nice painting. But he did many different paintings of Rainbow Falls and other scenes in the gorge. Here is, so this is another picture of Rainbow Falls, and then here's a picture of an area called Frowning Cliff, which is upstream from Rainbow Falls. But it really was Rainbow Falls that made Captain James Hope become the resident artist of Watkins Glen, which didn't become a state park until 1906, like I said. There were hotels there and so forth. Let's take a look at some of the old photographs, a couple of them, of the area of Glen of Pools, in this case, with Rainbow Falls in the back, from the 1800s, again from that Folly Bridge area. That Folly Bridge area, though, by the way, is called, this view is called Matchless Scene. They called it back in the old guidebooks. Oh, here's a view of Rainbow Falls. Let's zoom in a little bit of it. This is actually in the winter with ice, or maybe the fall and ice, and you can see the rickety wooden staircases that go up around the to get above the Triple Cascade waterfall, which is the waterfall that flows down below there. Rainbow Falls would be on the left coming off the cliff, but it's all icy there. Here's another photograph, again with, let's see, we'll zoom in on this. The Rainbow Falls on the left. And, oh, something's going on here. You can see some folks on the left part of the picture there. And they look like official sort of people with ties and so forth. And the bridge has changed. The old bridge was, let's see if we can get in on that again. The old bridge was that rickety wooden stuff. Now this is a concrete bridge which was built between 1906 and 1908. So the wooden stuff was replaced by the state park when it was created in 1906, and by 1908 it created a whole lot of structures. So we're going to go look at this guidebook here now that was put together. We'll look down in the lower left corner, published by the Hope Souvenir Gallery, Watkins Glen, New York. Now, the Souvenir Gallery, I think, moved down into the main, what's now the main entrance to the park. It's long gone now. But James Hope's son, James D. Hope, became a photographer, and he produced these guidebooks, but he also sold his father's paintings and his photographs. And here are a couple of his photographs of Rainbow Falls, and what they call, on the left there, actually it's in the right too, but farther view away, the flying stairs. So that concrete bridge they were building up here, they're also building a staircase on the left called the flying stairs. So that was all concrete with iron pipe railings, and some people didn't like that. There's still some remnants of that stuff in the park. Here is a colorized photograph, a colorized postcard of the flying stairs by Rainbow Falls. And there was a big flood in 1935 that did a lot of damage all over the region, probably the biggest flood in anyone's memory, that ripped out much of that concrete stairways and steps and walls and so forth. And this is actually right underneath the bridge above Rainbow Falls. And the twisted metal in there is a railroad trestle that was another, I don't know, half, 3/4 of a mile upstream that was ripped out by that flood. So after that, they were able to replace it. And Robert Treeman had become the chairman of the Finger Lakes State Parks Commission. He got a landscape architect involved and started building stonework. So here's some drawings, I think, of some of that original stonework after 1935. This would probably be, yeah, after 1935. And then what we have today, the beautiful stonework that we have in our state parks. And a lot of that was done in Watkins Glen. Actually, it was started in, I think, yeah, maybe 1933 or so. It was started in Watkins Glen, and the flood came along and washed out a lot of that work, but washed out the rest of the other work, the older concrete staircases and what have you. And then I think between 1935 and 1938, it was replaced with the stonework, which has been replaced over and over again. Not completely replaced, but repaired, extensively repaired. A lot of that work was done by the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 30s. And as you can see in this picture here, people walking behind the waterfall, and it can get pretty busy. So if you go over to Watkins Glen, they're building a new entrance there. They have almost built. It's going to open soon. It is open, actually, partially. It's a really nice new entrance to it, so I recommend you go over there. But if you go on the weekend in the summer, it's going to be pretty crowded. So going in the week is a really good idea. This is looking from that bridge back at Rainbow Falls, somebody putting their hand out into the water. So that's the second waterfall that you can walk behind. The first one is called Cavern Cascade. So we're going to take a look at another sort of a historical perspective on another waterfall. We had a show recently about what's called Minnehaha Falls. And if you you go to my website, walkinthepark.tv, you can search for Minnehaha Falls, and you'll find a whole episode about that and what changes have happened there. So in the middle of this picture is what's called Minnehaha Falls. Now, it's a heart-shaped pool. We'll see in a second. But look at this picture. This is another stereo picture here. We'll zoom in on one of the panels. And this is called Minnehaha Falls. And the people are looking at the falls down below the one in this picture. Now, this picture shows a fall in the middle of the picture, but down at the bottom is another waterfall. And that's what I think they used to call Minnehaha Falls. So let's see, is this another, getting a little, there's a Minnehaha Falls, laughing water, supposedly what it means. And folks are looking at that, and they're ignoring the one behind it, which is now, here's the back of that stereo card, and Minnehaha Falls name and laughing water in Watkins Glen, New York. It's like in about 6 different languages here. So it was an international attraction even back in the 1800s. There's another picture of looking at those 2 waterfalls, and the first one used to be called Minnehaha. Now we're looking at that again. The one in the back is this heart-shaped pool, and that's now called Minnehaha Falls. And there's an Indian Indian legend made up about a young woman who is in love with a young man, and there's another guy who was jealous, who was her suitor, and he killed her suitor, and she got broken up and threw herself off the cliff, and as her heart broke, became this heart-shaped pool. Well, you can go to my episode about Minnehaha Falls and get the geologic explanation for that, and so actually quite a lot to say about Minnehaha Falls. The original Minnehaha Falls, of course, was not in Watkins Glen. It was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So you can go online, look up Minnehaha Falls, and you'll find that there's about a 50-foot waterfall or so in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we're running down on time here. Probably have another couple of minutes. I think I'm going to go over, just to introduce you to something I'm doing over at Buttermilk Falls State Park, just south of Ithaca. And here I am. Now look at me. I'm wearing a park shirt and a couple of buttons on me. One of them says Ask Me. The other one announces that I'm a volunteer. I have started, I'm actually on the board of the Friends of Robert H. Freeman State Park, a cooperating association with the state park that helps with park projects, helps raise funds, and organizes educational programs and things like that with the state park. Well, Robert H. Freeman State Park also runs Buttermilk Falls State Park. Their staff run those 2 parks, as well as Allen H. Freeman State Marine Park and Newtown Battlefield Reservation State Park down in Elmira. So anyway, they wanted to get some volunteers to patrol the gorge, really for educational purposes, and orient people to attractions in the area, the trails, I explain the geology and other natural history there, and human history, and I'll tell you where to go to eat too if you want to looking for a restaurant. But so I started out recently, and it's a lot of fun, and I meet people there every couple of days. I go over there, and I started out started a little Facebook page. You can go online at Buttermilk Falls Diary. So some of the notes that I write up from each of my days in the gorge or hours in the gorge, I'd go for a couple of hours. I will post there usually with a photograph. So I welcome you to go see that. So I think that's about all I have time for today. We're running down the time here. So I invite you to turn off this screen and go outside and go for a walk in the park. Thanks for joining me. Is a